Um, so welcome to today's topic, which is building AI chat using Microsoft Fabric and Azure services. As the events coordinator mentioned earlier, this presentation will be presented by myself and Wilson, as well as Roman, who is also on the line with us. So, yeah, with that, we'll get started. So my name is Wilson Mock. I have over 20 years of experience in IT. I started as a software developer, and I'm currently consulting at SMS Equipment as a data architect. Previously, I worked at Avanan as a manager of data engineering, lead data architect at CAE, as well as lead AI architect at Air Canada. I'm a Microsoft MVP for data platform as well as a Databricks champion. So if you would like to follow me, you can find me at LinkedIn, GitHub, as well as C Sharp Corner as slash Wilson dash Mock.
Hi everyone, my name is Raman Shamartanov. I don't have too many experience like Wilson does, but I've been in the industry maybe for the last 15 years. In the last 6 years, I've been very deeply on innovation. I worked with Wilson Air Canada before, and then in the other side was Enbridge. I was a consultant. I was an architect there, and right now at a utility company called Enmax here in Alberta, I'm the program architect for the Innovation Hub.
Cool. So for this session, we're going to cover an introduction of Microsoft Fabric, focusing on the components that we're going to be using in this demo, mainly the integrations, as well as how we're going to transform data to enable AI chat integrations or interaction, sorry. And we're going to explore how we're going to utilize and achieve that goal using Dataflow Gen 2. Dive into the processes that take your data from Microsoft Fabric and then using it to generate your embeddings or the retrieval augmented generation, and then building a sample data AI application out of it using SynapseML, Azure OpenAI, as well as AI search. So in this session, there'll be two demos. The first one is going to be focusing on bringing your own data into Fabric as using data flow gen 2 to prepare the data will be for myself. And then the second demo will be presented by Roman, focusing on using Synapse ML with OpenAI and AI search to create the embedding as well as the chat interactions that we mentioned earlier. So for this session, it's good that if you have fundamental knowledge of some basic SQLs and PySpark of Python, that's be primarily the tools we'll be using today, the languages. And then if you have some basic understanding around AI chat or retrieval augmented generation RAG, will be beneficial as well. So after the first demo, we're gonna have a quick 5 minutes Q&A session, followed by a longer Q&A session at the end of the presentations. And all the code you see today will be available in the GitHub repository that we'll share at the end of the presentation. They should be up in about a week's time there. We need a few more days to get everything prepared into the GitHub. So, all right. So with that, let's dive in. So what is Microsoft Fabric, right? I'm sure you guys all have heard about Microsoft Fabric in the past year from Microsoft. So Microsoft Fabric is a unified analytic SaaS platform designed to unify your data solution by eliminating the need to set up individual Azure services. Previously in Azure, you need to create variety of services for you to, do your integrations or extracting data, or even doing your data science work, right? To build your data end-to-end solution. So with Microsoft Fabric, they try to simplify all of that and provide that under one single platform. So they have capability that are matching Azure Data Factory, Azure Synapse, Azure ML, for example, or even for time series data, you have You have the real-time analytic, which is similar to Data Explorer. And of course, since we're Microsoft Fabric lives inside the Power BI environment, Power BI will be a part of that, and as well as more importantly, the data lake storage will also be incorporated into this single platform. So with all of this capability under one single tool, um, we will dive into each of the foundations that you see on the screen and quickly talk about what each one does and how does that kind of help you build your end-to-end solution. So the first part that Microsoft Fabric provides is a intelligent data foundation. So the main concept here is those are your different Azure, previously Azure services that you would set up, right? Different type of workloads that you need to run in order to build your data or AI solution that I mentioned earlier. So we'll go from left to right, go over each of the services. There's seven of them in total. So the data factory service components in here um, provides a low-code solution for your data integration and data pipeline that's very similar to what you have in Azure Data Factory. You can create, manage, and monitor your data pipelines. In addition to that, they implemented a Dataflow Gen 2. So that's based on the Power Query, if you have used that before, which allow you to ingest integrate as well as do any simple, straightforward transformation that you would do. So for our demo, we will dive into that one, that components later on today. The next item is the data engineering. So that's focusing on developing your data solution using the Spark platform. So this is very similar to, if you use Databricks notebook before, or in the case of in Azure, the Synapse Analytic notebook. And this is built on top of the Apache technology, which is for big data processing and analysis. It has some benefits, including things like supporting multiple languages like PySpark, Scala, Spark SQL, and it also have a large library of extension you can install, which will simplify your data processing and analysis as well. The third element we have is the data warehouse, which provides a virtual warehouse to store and transform your data using a Transact SQL. So if you're familiar with your on-prem data warehouse with SQL Server, or if you use the Synapse Analytic data dedicated warehouse before, this is pretty much a similar capability as those products that I mentioned. The next item is the data science. So this is focusing on your machine learning and AI solution. So you can do a lot of things like tracking your model, creating your machine learning model, running different experiment with ML flows, and as well as utilize a specialized package called SynapseML. I think that's something Roman will be covering in more in depth later on in the session. Now the last third item is the real-time analytics. As we mentioned earlier, this um, capability is used to build end-to-end solutions for your event or streaming data. So that's very similar to your Azure Data Explorer. If you have used that before, you can create a real-time uh, database which you can query using KQL. Um, and then, of course, we're going to have the Power BI for visualizations, like we mentioned. And finally, the last item here called Data Activator on the right. So this is a very new tool that data capability that Microsoft has added. And essentially, it allows your data to trigger a response from your data changes. So when a certain condition is met that you can define, then you will automatically, let's say, call an API, activate um, your different algorithms that you have deployed in your ML models, for example. So that's a very powerful tool, allow us to be more data driven, less reactive to the matter, where before a lot of the um, response to data change is either going to be heavily custom coded in Azure function, for example, but all of that is simplified in a GUI, which is very nice to have. So the next foundation here is the single data foundation. So uh, earlier we addressed all the workload that we have, and the next items that we want to address is how we store our data, right? So the key concept for this foundation is um, a new language called a new service, a new capability called One Lake is provided a convenient way for you to access your data from different places. So this includes data that you will be working with in Fabric, like what we will show you in a minute. That creates things like a lakehouse, so that will store your structure, unstructured, or semi-structured data. You could expose data from the data warehouse, the events house, which is the data explorer database, as well as retrieving data from Azure SQL data lake that you have stored in Azure, or the data explorer database that you have set up in the Azure data explorer services before. I think the one main other item is the ability to connect to other cloud vendor storage. So this one lake has a capability to connect to the AWS S3 or the Google Cloud Storage as well. So if you have data from a different cloud, you can make your life a lot easier by having them all in one place, especially if you want to generate your report in Power BI. You can reduce your need to copying data across multiple systems. So with that kind of overview all out of the way, let's dive into an example here. So let's imagine a time when your boss asks you to create AI chatbot for the customer service department. You need to in order to enable them to serve your customer better, right? Drive better customer satisfaction. So and you want to help them achieve that goal. So, what would kind of be the benefits of wanting to do that, right? So that could be, we want to reduce the customer resolution time. If they're calling in to cancel an order, or if they have a trouble with the delivery of a package, you want to be able to help them, right? Help them quickly as well. You don't want the customer to be frustrated. Another benefit could be you need to this AI chatbot needs to provide accurate information. Currently, the customer service team struggles with different applications trying to retrieve different data from multiple systems or different places, and that makes the job a lot harder. And as part of that, it also increases the problem resolution time. And finally, one thing that the customer service team brought up was that it's kind of hard for them to remember and recall all the company policies that they have. So, when you're doing a return, what is the amount limit you can do the return for, or whatnot. So they want this AI chatbot to be able to help them as a one point access, a single point of access for the customer service team to be able to ask questions to it and able to help them find the right answers for the customer, right? So for that, in order to do that, we need to address the data integration and data transformation issue. So um, as we alluded earlier, we will be using Dataflow Gen 2 for that process. So we'll follow a very traditional a data engineering process called ELT, which is extract, load, and transform. So what that means is we will use the Dataflow Gen 2 service that we talked about earlier. We're going to extract the data from our sales database, and then we're going to write that data out into our lakehouse. After that, we would access the data set that we store in the lakehouse. We would join those data together or go through a transformation of the data to create a new table that can be later used for your AI chatbot to generate all your embeddings and so forth. So that will be done using Dataflow Gen 2 as well. Okay. So we're about to dive into the first demo here. We're going to be preparing the customer service data for the chatbot. So we very similar to the previous diagram with a little more detail based on the demo you're going to see. So we have a sales database in this case. We want to extract the orders from the customers. So that's order and order line. Order line contains each individual items the customer has purchased. We'll be using Dataflow Gen 2 to retrieve that data from the sales database and then write it out into the customer service lakehouse that we will be creating. So um, oh, after we do that, we want to combine the order and the order line. There's a typo here on the screen. Should be order line. Um, and we're going to create a new data set called customer purchase. And then we will write that, use Dataflow Gen 2 to write that back out to the customer service lakehouse. So yeah, so the customer purchase data will be focused on specifically what the AI chatbot will need that Roman will dive into after the first demo and going through um, some of the concepts as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump over to our Microsoft Fabric environment. so so in here, um, you can see that I'm in Microsoft Fabric. This is just like your Power BI environment that you see. So I created a workspace called customer service. So in here, we're gonna be going through some of the similar steps that we talked about earlier. So we would get the data, we will store the data, and then we will prepare the data for your with the transformations. And then Roman would be focusing on the analyze and train, or in this case, creating your embedding and so forth. But we won't go too much detail into that. For our first demo, Roman will be covering that in the second demo. So for our demo here, we want to create the storage account. So our lake house in this case. So we do that by clicking on the new item on the side. We can just select the lake house here. So this is just your essentially your storage. So for us, we're going to keep the naming convention pretty simple, just calling it the CS underscore lake house. And we'll hit create on that. And then we'll just take a second here, and then there's two folder structure that gets created here: the table and then the files. For most of our work today, we're focusing on the table. The file is for any data that are not applicable to the format that you'll be creating out of the table. So, for now, we're going to close this part off and jump back into the customer service workspace. And we can see that our lakehouse is created as you guys saw earlier, and it comes with two different subcomponents, which is the semantic model as well as the SQL analytic endpoint. So the semantic model is something you would normally use with your Power BI reports, which we won't be touching on today. But the SQL endpoint here allows your data analysts or your business users to query this data using the traditional SQL tool like SSMS or Data Studio, Azure Data Studio as well. So this any data you write into this lakehouse would give them the capability to read the data as long as it can be uh, accessible through the table folder that you saw earlier. But we'll get back to that in a minute there. For now, we are going to bring the data from our sales database first. So to do that, we're going to click on the new items under Get Data. So there's different tools we can use. For example, we talked about using the data engineering notebook for Spark, for example. But for our example here, we're going to keep it relatively simple and use the Dataflow Gen 2 solution. or the capability from Microsoft Fabric here. Okay, it's going to take a second to load up. Let's see here. So let me refresh my screen. Make sure that was actually, maybe I didn't actually click on that button. So let's give that a try one more time. There we go. So the first thing we'll do here is we're going to rename this data flow. So we're going to call this get customer service data, right? Uh, so in here, we need to get our data from the Azure SQL database. So we'll click on the Get Data button on the top. Azure SQL database should be one of the top items that we have available to select. So we'll click on that, and I'm just going to copy and paste in our server and database name. And this is a new connection, so I'm going to copy in the username and password here to create this new connection. So now what Fabric or the Dataflow Gen 2 is doing is retrieving a list of table for you. So in this database, there are, things like customer, different purchases and things like that. For us, we're interested in the sales order and the sales order line. You might be potentially interested in the customer as well. So, if you like to bring that in, you can get the customer, name, addresses, and so forth, that kind of information. But for now, we're just going to focus on the order and order line, as we don't really want to retrieve any personal identification information into our processes for today. So with that, we're going to just click create here. Okay, and with this, Dataflow Gen 2 has created the steps required for us to gather the data for each of the data sets. So for the sales order line here, you can see a lot of different statistics information getting generated for each of the columns. So to enable that, you need to go into the data view here under view, data view, and you can click enable column profile, as well as you have to check the column quality detail as well as the column value distribution. So with that, you can see all the information that you have. This is a good way to have a quick glance of your data to make sure you're getting what you're expecting out of the data yourself. So we'll take a quick look at this data really quickly. For example, we can take a look at the let's try the sales order, might be a little bit better. We can see that the number of customers we have. So we have 452 distinct customer and 173 uniques. So I just want to point that out, the difference between distinct and unique, because often we use those two terms interchangeably in our SQL statements, for example. So what this is saying is there's 452 customers that have ever purchased from our company, and 173 of those 452 customer only purchased only once from our company. So at a glance, you can see certain field that might not be might not have unique. For example, you expect all your salespeople to be selling to make sales more than once, right? So it's good that we see seal unique here, for example, under the salesperson ID, right? And in the case of your primary key, like an order ID, you should see the same number of unique and distinct. Um, if you see anything else, then that's quite alarming. Okay, so it's a good quick data validation for you before you dive into transforming your data and so forth. Okay, so with that kind of explanation out of the way, the next thing we want to do is write this data set the way as is into our lakehouse. The following the ELT nomenclature, we have extracted the data already. Now we're going to load it into the our CS lakehouse is the next step. So to do that is relatively simple in Dataflow Gen 2. All we have to do is select each of the entity here. So I'll start with the order, and we click on Add Data Destination. In this case, we're going to pick the lakehouse as our selection. Looks like we already have a lakehouse connection. It's important to note that you can only have one lakehouse connection as well, because remember the concept of one lake is we are able to access all of our data by having one connection, right? So because of that, they limit you to only one lake house connections there, which you can see all the lake houses underneath it, or all the storages underneath it in this case. So yeah, so the next thing is we're gonna pick our destination. So you can see, we have access to the customer service test environment, and they have their own lake houses. But in our case, we're just gonna focus on our lake house under the customer service environment. So this is the lake house we just created earlier. There's no, of course, there's no table underneath it. So we're gonna leave everything the way it is. Nothing needs to be changed, and we're just gonna click next for the next step. Um, so the next step here shows all the columns that we have, and mainly we're just gonna use the default settings that they provide us. Dataflow Gen to read the database table, so they know all the schema information. So we don't need to make any changes. And at the bottom here, you see a list of um, what they identify as records, or in our case, kind of the foreign key that we want to join. So they will list the foreign key item on the top, like customer ID, for example. Um, but they couldn't find the table to join with, which is fine. We will join that. We will join the table later on in the next following step. So yeah, because of that, everything looks good. We're just gonna click Save Settings here. Okay, that'll take a second, and you can see now there's a little lake house icon that shows up for your sales item. And I'm going to repeat that process really quickly for the sales line. You can have both of them copied across. Okay, so this is the sales order line. Again, we're just going to accept the automated settings there. Okay, so with both of them set up, okay, I'm going to do one last check to make sure all my connections are in place. And that's you do that under the manage connection. So we see our lakehouse and we see our database. So everything seems to look fine with me here at this point. So I'm going to go and click on publish here. So just one thing to note. Oh, I jumped off there. But one thing to note at the bottom, I'm just going to go into a different data flows for now. At the bottom there, there's different. Oh, they don't have that. So maybe we'll give it a wait, and I can cover the one piece that want to talk about the different views that we have inside the Dataflow Gen 2. But in the meantime, we can take a look, see what's going on here. So this is publishing in progress. This is usually takes a few seconds here to get published. And then what happens is after this is published, they will automatically do the refresh for you. So you should see a refresh happening over here pretty quickly. Sometimes the screen doesn't refresh 100%, and we'll go into the other. We'll go inside the history to double check. Just refresh my screen, make sure it was deployed. Okay, yeah. So it just took a second here. Now it's being refreshed as we talked about. This usually takes about just under a minute, but we can always go into the refresh history to see how this is um, going. If you want to go in there, but just gonna take a quick minute here to wait for this to be refreshed properly there. And then after the data is refreshed, we will go into the lakehouse to take a look at the data as well while we wait there. While we wait, does anyone have any questions? So if you do, feel free to type it into the chat or feel free to ask away as well.
One question here. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm basically new to this this area, so I'm kind of familiar with Azure. So if I just want to kind of try this out later, how much cost will be there, so that I'm aware of the cost upfront?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first part of the demo, you can actually enable. So if you sign on to Power BI, you can enable something called a trial. You can enable the free trial here, and that will allow you to test out the first step of the demo. The second step of the demo is a little more tricky because it require something called F64 SKU, which is a relatively pricey SKU to execute. I would say probably, probably take about $50. I would say maybe a little less, maybe 25 to $50. Depends how quickly you run through the demo. But it's a little bit more on the expensive side, I would say, to run through a demo. But yeah, it is available if you want to give that a try.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. So it seems like the data has been refreshed. I just want to cover the view before we'll go back into the data that is available. So down here, there's actually three different view that you can have in Dataflow Gen 2. So you might log into here and you will see completely different than what I see. So usually when you first log in, you will see the queries on the side here, and you will see this data set that you loaded, right? So if you want to trigger the diagram view, this will collapse the query and brings this visualization onto the top. I personally prefer this as it gives you a more visualized mechanism on what is taking place. There's also things that um, you can just see the schema. So the schema is the data that you saw, the auto schema that you saw earlier, and then there's also the data that you can see. So this is the data view. So you can search through some of the data that you have at the bottom part of it. Okay. So with that, I'm going to jump back onto going to close this off. Exit. We make no changes, which is good. And we're going to jump into the lake house here, the SQL endpoint that we talked about earlier. And we can, take a look at the data that we have. So we're just going to do a quick refresh to make sure they actually see our table. So that's under schema, DBO, table, and then we see the two table that we just ingested. So a quick query, for example, would be something like, just going to copy and paste this in. So we want to, take a look at all the order and all the items being ordered for the month of May, for example, of this year. So, yeah, they cannot be in yins, of course. So just fix that typo there. And you can see this runs as we join the data. Right, so it took a little over 11 seconds to run, and there's a little over this a lot more than 2,000 record, but it's showing 1,600 records for now. So yeah, so you can even treat this as a SQL query if you want to, run that on your SSMS, for example. Okay. All right. Now with that out of the way, we're gonna jump to the second step of our process here, which is to prepare or transform our data, right? So we'll do the same thing as you saw on the get data. We'll click on the new item and then we'll pick the Dataflow Gen 2 again. So with this, I'm just gonna rename this data flow called prepare for embedding, because that's the step that Roman will be doing next for his demo. As we talked about before, we're going to go get data. But in this case, since we already extracted the data into our lakehouse, we don't have to go to the database again. So we can select the lakehouse that we copy the data to. And you'll show all the files or all the tables that we have. In our case, again, we are interested in the order and the order line. And then we can go click create. Yeah, the main reason we separated the two-step is you don't want to always hit your sales database, right? Because through all the data is different transactions happening. You want to extract the data once for all your analytical use. You don't want to keep hitting that database over and over again, as you would slow it down to a halt if you're running different analytics or building different chatbots for different departments. So in this case, we have two of them, the order line and the order. We're going to select the order line in this case, and we are going to join this data with the sales orders. So to do that, we can go up to the top here with the menu. We're going to be using the merge query command, but in our case, we want to merge as new, okay? Because we want to create a new data set at the end here. So the left table, we have order line. The right table, of course, we have order. Since one is a parent-child relationship, we know this is going to be a inner joint, right? We want every order to be mapped to the together. So instead of picking the order yourself, right, you might have sometimes when you do joins, you might have multiple matchings variables. Dataflow Gen 2 provides a capability to kind of give you a suggestion. So at the top here, you can click on suggestions, and you will automatically knows that the order line table order ID is equals to the sales order ID. So you just click on that, and it will highlight the rows for you. And it says that, well, this joint has, little over 800,000 records on after you join together. So this looks good, and we're gonna click OK on that. This step will take about a minute to run, as trying to combine quite a bit of the data here. So you can see the data being processed down at the bottom, as well as how much compute and memory you're using of that capacity. So we're pretty close of finishing here. All right. So of course this won't be able to display all the rows, but it displays what it could. About 99 rows. Took about 28 seconds to run, which is awesome. Okay, so the next thing we want to do with this is we want to select some of the fields out of the order. So if you look at this table so far, because we joined the order line with the order, all of this fields are coming from the order line, and we only show the table itself for the order table that we joined. So we need to click on this little double arrow button, which will expand the sales order columns. So we don't need all the columns. We only need a few. So we'll get the customer ID, for example. We'll pick up the salesperson ID. The order date is pretty important when you try to track customer order. And if they have a different system that they keep track of the order number, if it's a corporate customer, for example, we'll want to make sure we grab that as well. Not every column we're selecting here will be used for our AI chatbot, but you just want to make sure you grab the key fields that you will find interesting, as you might be required for a future development of your chatbot. So the next thing we want to do is first reduce the number of columns we have. As you can see, this list is the 16 columns right now. We don't need all of them, right? So we'll click on the plus sign, go choose column. We want most of the column, but we don't need the package ID. The description here describes which item you purchased. So that's why the stock item ID will be kept along with that. Of course, our primary key and the foreign key of the order will be kept as well. We want to see the quantity of items, how much it costs for each of the item. We definitely want to know what the tax rate is. And we don't need to know about when the items were picked, nor when the items were last edited or modified in this case, because we do have the order ID that we need. And of course, we're going to keep, and finally, we will keep the 4 fields that we have from the order table that we just selected, right? So we can go OK around that. And then a choose column item is entered here. So you can see this is now have 11 columns instead of 16 that you saw earlier. Finally, we will do one additional command, which is to calculate the line item total. Sometimes it is much easier to pre-calculate fields for the AI chatbot instead of trying to calculate them on the fly. So with that, we will add a custom column. It's easier to search it up. Type in the word custom. So you'll add custom column here. My column name would be called item sold total. This is going to be a decimal because I'm going to multiply the quantity by clicking on the insert, multiply with the unit price. Okay, I'm going to ignore the tax rates for this particular calculations, but in some scenario you might want to do that. So we're going to click OK on that. So now we have a custom calculations being done, and you can see the new column has been added as well. So you can see here's there's a lot of chocolate being bought, seems like, and given it's 120 and 855 per piece, is 1026 there. So let's see quickly if there's other item. So there's 77 distinct values. So there should be other items here, but based on the sorting, seems like it's the chocolate is seems to be at the top of the sort. But nevertheless, everything seems okay. We're gonna just publish that. You might want to look through the data more thoroughly, but in this case, I think I did everything right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and publish that, and the same thing is gonna happen, right? This needs to be published first, this workflow or this data flow, and then the refresh will run shortly after that. Oh, I forgot one step actually. I actually forgot to write this data out to the lakehouse. So unfortunately, we won't be able to stop the publishing. We have to wait for the publish to be done first. But this is a good example of what happens if you do forget a step. You will have to go back in and after the publish. Okay, so we'll give it a wait. Then we'll go back in and edit that. So while we wait, I'm just gonna delete the extra data flow that we seem to have created early on, just to clean things up to look more organized here. All right, seems like that is done and is refreshing. And I'm gonna cancel my refresh. It's canceling. Hopefully that's gonna done really quickly that we can go back in. Okay, perfect. And we want to write this out into the data lake, right? So same as before, we can click on the destination, the data lake. We already have the connection to it. So jump over really quickly, change the table name. So in this case, I'm just going to copy and paste the table name because I am not the best speller, just don't want to make a mistake on that. And then we're going to copy the same table. Everything should be automatic because we did define the column type earlier in the transformation. And we can just click Save Settings there. And it will actually publish one more time. Okay. So while we wait for the publish, maybe we'll just or and the data refresh, maybe we'll just jump quickly to a Q&A around that. Anyone have any questions? Okay. Okay, it looks like deployment is publishing is done. Now just waiting for the quick refresh here.
Ilsham, just one question I had.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. In the in the beginning of the slide, you have mentioned that data activator. Somehow I lost the connection. So could you please just brief once?
Yeah,
Data
of course.
activator. Yeah.
Yes. So the data before we have Fabric, a lot of time when you have a data change overnight, for example, or if you have more events-based data, you need to create your own custom code, right? Either in Azure Functions or whatever, not to respond to the change of data. So one good example is you might have different machine learning model based on certain scenario you have in your let's say in your e-commerce website, right? Do you do a promotions if it's a new customer or not? That kind of a scenario. So before you might have to write custom code to call an API to enable the specific machine learning model to run, right? In this case, once the data activator would basically simplify that process for you. You can set certain condition where it will trigger the API call for you. So you just have to put in the URL and whatnot. You will automatically trigger without you building all the custom code that you usually require, essentially. Does that answer your question there?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. So with the interest of time, I'm just going to jump over the refresh history. Looks like everything went. I'm going to hand this back over to Roman, and he will show you on his side how he can check the data as well. But if we want, we can jump back to the SQL endpoint that you saw earlier to check the data. But yeah, with the interest of time, I was gonna hand this back over to Roman, and he will continue on with the second part of his demo.
Thank you, Wilson. Let me share my screen.